Let's come back to our top story, the one that's making the headlines, the deficit and the rhetoric, both playing into the possibility of a fall election. Tony Clement is the federal industry minister, and he's here in our studio this morning. Thank you for coming in.
Nice to be back.
Lots of big questions to ask, many areas. Let's start with a big number, big question about the big number, $56 billion, the revised deficit figure. Third revision in 8 months.
Sure.
You need new forecasters?
Well, I think the problem is, of course, it's a moving target as to when the recovery is, what the government revenues are going to be, and I think we have an obligation to be realistic with Canadians. This is a realistic plan, not only about what the deficit is now, but how to get out of the deficit within a reasonable period of time.
Well, I think that's what we didn't hear in enough detail to satisfy many people. Certainly, Minister Flaherty said it will be painful. It's not so much, I think, for many questions, the question, how we got to that big number, but how do we get out? So what are the details? He just talked about the medium term. There will be a plan. We didn't really get firm details. How are you going to get us out?
Sure. Well, he said by 2015 we'll be out. And part of the way that we're going to do that, which he did say yesterday, is we have a number of one-time only stimulus spending within our current deficit that is going to have to drop off the table. We're going to have to stop spending on stimulus funding for things like infrastructure, things in my portfolio, for instance, like one-time only or two-time only things for tourism, for instance, some of our infrastructure programs that were one-time only. These kinds of things are going to actually have to drop off the table. We're going to have to stop spending on the economic stimulus as the economy grows and recovers. So once you knock that off, and the auto spending as well, once you knock all those things off the deficit, you're talking about $30 billion right there. And then the rest of it is going to have to come from constraints in expenditures as the economy grows, so that we can...
Constraints in expenditures, which has not been really the hallmark of the government. You've undertaken some pretty hefty spending initiatives. Will you be able to pull in the reins?
Well, yes, I think the answer has to be yes. A lot of these things that are not directly related to tax hikes or are not related to cutting transfers to people and to partners like the provinces, there is enough in the rest of the budget that if you constrain that, you can get to surplus. Now, is it going to be easy? No. And we're going to have more details as we get closer to those budgets. So we're not giving you 7 years of budgets in a row. That isn't what Jim Flaherty did yesterday. But he did say, here's the plan, and here's a realistic date at which we will get back to surplus.
The strategy behind this seems to be, to those watching it, get this bad news out there right away, because you have to announce it publicly, and better now than in the middle of what may be a fall election. But even though Mr. Flaherty was saying it's not the time for political games, essentially, do you not think just gave to the opposition the opportunity to take this to an election, to fight on the issue of financial management, maybe even actually, fanning the flames and taking them closer to bringing down the government?
Well, I think they've already decided to bring down the government. I think Mr. Ignatieff has been very clear that despite the wishes of Canadians, who none of us want to go to the polls again, so soon after the last one, that he's going to bring down the government. So that's already out there, and that isn't our choice. That's Mr. Ignatieff's choice, and he's going to have to be accountable for that. And of course, the economy is going to be the big issue in the election.
Fighting it on the issue of who best to manage it, who best has the interests of Canadians at heart in terms of the recovery, these kinds of things. And we wanted to set out our plan, quite frankly. And it's our obligation to be accountable to Canadians on our plan, regardless of where we sit in our standings in the House of Commons. So that's why Jim Flaherty was out there. But at the same time, he said, and it's quite true, people are going to have to judge. They're going to judge our plan, but they're going to have to judge Mr. Ignatieff's plan. He said he's going to raise taxes. He said that he's the one who was barking every time we stood in the House of Commons and said we're spending this much. He said spend more. And now he's trying to be fiscal probity. Well, it's just not going to wash. Well, he is talking about that today, we understand. Later on this morning, he's going to be talking about the Liberal plan for employment insurance. And what we understand is he'll put forward the idea that it won't be as costly as your government has been portraying the Liberal plan.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the cost that's going to be the issue there. Their plan says you work for 45 days and you get EI for the rest of the year. I think for most Canadians that's not only too rich, but it's unfair. And so we will have a difference of opinion on our EI plans as well. You're quite right. And these are issues, I guess, what we're hearing is these are issues that are going to be fought in an election campaign. Not of our making, not our first choice. We want to focus on the recovery and focus on the economy, but Mr. Ignatieff has other plans.
Okay, I want to get your take on the tape. You've probably seen it. Of course, we've been broadcasting it, the tape of Mr. Harper speaking to a crowd of party faithful and talking in terms privately that he doesn't talk about publicly in terms of the need for a majority government. But
Talking as he did about why the Conservatives need a majority to carry on with part of the social agenda as far as judges are concerned and the gun registry is concerned, immediately opposition parties jump on that and saying it's the hidden agenda, Stephen Harper. Proof right there on that tape. How damaging was that tape?
I think most people would say, here's a politician representing a party speaking to supporters of the party saying we deserve and we need to be a majority government. That's not exactly stop the press's kind of logic here. Sure,
except that he won't say we want a majority government
I think,
in the broad public.
No, what he's been saying now since Mr. Ignatieff started with his threats is, look, this is destabilizing to have an election once again 10 months or 11 months after the last one. It is destabilizing. The other guys, it's very clear, are going to gang up in Parliament. The coalition is going to be revived. And the only way to get around this constant coalition building by the opposition is to have a majority Conservative government. So he has been saying that, and that's what he said to his audience. And you mentioned the gun registry. I mean, we've been very clear that the long gun registry has not worked. It's been a $2 billion boondoggle that hasn't solved any crime or made our streets safer in cities or urban or rural areas. So these are not new things, and I think the only thing that was titillating for the media perhaps was that somebody was smuggled in and smuggled out a tape. But really, what Stephen Harper was saying is nothing different from what he's been saying for many months now.
You're back in Ottawa next week. Mm-hmm. What do you think the session? How long will it be? What do you think it's going to be like?
Well, I guess because the opposition's on pre-election footing, it's unfortunately hide your kids from watching the question period is my best advice, because the opposition could get pretty nasty. But hey, we're here to govern. We're here to focus on our agenda for the economy. That isn't going to change until we're forced to change and to be a political party that is fighting an election. That's not our first choice. Practically every Canadian that I've talked to since Mr. Ignatieff issued his threat has said we don't need an election right now, but that may
odds
not be.
You're saying odds are we're going to a vote.
Well, Mr. Ignatieff has other plans, and he's not listening to Canadians, I would have to say.
Tony Clement, thank you so much for coming in. The Industry Minister, Tony Clement, here in Toronto.
Thank you.